Hey, church family. This week we continue our study in looking at Psalm 91. This week we are in verses 5 and 6 of Psalm 91. So let me read those for us. I will be reading out of the English Standard Version. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. This follows right along with what Tim Baum encouraged us with last week when he read verses 3 and 4. Let me draw your attention to those verses as a way for us to understand what's going on here in verses 5 and 6. For he, that's God, will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and buckler. Brothers and sisters in Christ, what we find in verses 5 and 6 of Psalm 91 is practical application for the one who finds God to be their refuge and fortress. Today, do you see God as your refuge and fortress? Is he someone that you run to, not just when things are bad, but he is someplace that you want to abide in and dwell in because of the safety and security that he alone provides for you? And what we find in verses 5 and 6 is for that person, that is the you that starts off in verse 5. It's the person who sees, who dwells in the shelter of the Most High and abides in the shadow of the Almighty. It is that person who will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day. Notice in verses 5 and 6, there are references to night and day. Verse 5, terror of the night, the arrow that flies by day. Verse 6, pestilence that stalks in darkness, and destruction that wastes at noonday. And what David is doing here, what the writer of Psalm 91 is doing here, is he's helping us to see that morning or noon or night or any time throughout the day, the person who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, he will experience liberation from these things. And notice in verse 5 that these things he focuses on physical things in verse 5. He focuses on the terror of the night and the arrow that flies by day. These would be things that would cause violent harm physically, whether it's something that happens to you at night or whether it's something that happens to you in the middle of the day. But notice that in verse 6, he shifts to non-physical things. The pestilence that stalks you in darkness or the destruction that wastes at noonday. We can't really put our hands on pestilence. It affects us and it is something that we struggle with as human beings, but it's not something that we really see coming. Same thing with destruction that happens at noonday. And what the writer of this psalm is trying to help us understand is the person who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, the person who abides in the shadow of the Almighty, that person has no cause to fear all of these things. There are unpredictable things that come into our life. This time of year, it could be something like a deer jumping out in front of you in the middle of the night. It could be something like waking up in the morning and one of your kids is sick. It could be any number of things. But brothers and sisters, if we are dwelling and abiding in Christ, we have no cause to fear those things. So, what are you fearing? What are you worried about? What are you anxious for? Brothers and sisters, we have no cause to worry or to fear if we are dwelling in the shelter of the Almighty, if we are abiding in the shadow of the Most High. Brothers and sisters, we can echo the words of the Apostle Paul in Philippians 4:6 when he says, "Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your request be made known unto God."